Okay, now we're live.
Our meeting is in session, and we'll start with our pledge of allegiance, and we'll ask Martin Carpenter to lead us in pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll introduce the members this morning. I'm Charles. I'm the chairman of the Board of Elections. And as I call your name, if you can raise your hand, please. Again, Martin Carpenter.
Here.
And Richard Ashton. Here. Craig Kennedy. Here. All right. Appreciate you guys being here today. And we pause now for public comment period.
Anybody sign up and you check to see if anybody signed up?
Okay. No one has signed up for public comment. We always place emphasis on conflicts of interest. We want to avoid any appearance of impropriety, for a great weight of confidence is in us. And so we ask now, is there anything that we need to bring to the table in regards to a conflict of interest among us?
I have no conflict.
If no conflict, then we move on to the approval of the minutes.
It's been a while.
If someone could make a motion on the minutes.
I don't have a copy of them here with y'all. We had emailed them to you,
Yeah,
but it's been a while. So before Thanksgiving.
I move we accept the minutes. Second.
It's been moved and properly second that we would accept the minutes. You've heard the question. You prepared to vote? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. And now we come to the consideration of the plans for today. Madam Director, any comments before we get started?
Okay, I had provided y'all with the guidance from the state board, as well as some of the turnout that we've had from past elections. And then I do want to mention that we did hear from both Village of Pinehurst and Town of Aberdeen that they are okay with us using their facilities, either at the Pinehurst Community Center or at Cannon Park or the Aberdeen Lake. So, and I will remind you, we do have to be at the Agricultural Center because that is our, in lieu of the BOE office site, so that one is required by statute. So we will be there. I recommend one or the other. Doesn't matter to me which one, Pinehurst Community Center or Aberdeen Recreation Station as your additional site.
Can we get by with one site? I ran the numbers last night based on the voters last time, 3,825. And if we had 3 sites at 11.5 hours a day for 16 days and 7 hours for 1 day, it came up to basically 573 election hours, which based on the population gave us about 6.7 voters per hour, 1 voter every 9 minutes. Now that's a lot of dead time in there, I believe, for that.
But in
I don't know why we can't get by with
in
one.
years past, we have done one site over here at Ag Center in the non-presidential years because the primaries are typically a lower turnout. And I gave you those numbers.
Well, one comment that I would make is that it needs to be representative for the whole county. And it may be that, what we were looking at is the Ag Center, everybody knows what that is. But then there's another side of the county that it might be difficult for people to get to. I'm not talking about 3, but if there were additional site, I think Aberdeen has agreed that they would do that site. And you looked at the information she sent, right?
Yes.
Okay, and you saw the 15-mile radius one that she had in here?
That I may not have seen.
Yeah, she sent it.
It's those last 2 maps.
So the one that says possible early voting site with 15-mile radius,
Everybody, they've got.
this one.
Okay, there it is.
So either site, you're getting the same coverage pretty
Right,
much.
and so you would then have, it's equidistant in the county, and it would be accessible to everyone. I just want to make sure, if we're going to err, we're going to err on the side of everybody having an equal opportunity. More sites than that, I don't know. But I do think that this speaks very clearly for what needs to occur. What other comments?
How much does it cost for us to run a site for 17 days? And I assume the same volunteers don't volunteer every day. That would be a lot of work for 12 hours a day. And how many people do we need at the site?
So per shift, we use at least 12 people. So that's, and they work 2 shifts, a morning shift and afternoon shift. So that's 24 people per site per day. So if you got 2 sites, that's 48 people per day. So, you know, I do have some that come back every year and work, so we'll just add on to it from some of the others. But yeah, and then it'll probably cost between 35 to 40,000 payroll wise.
Per site?
No, for both sites, because in March of 2020, we did 2 sites. We did here and the Pinehurst Fire Department, and that payroll was about 30,000, and that was, Carthage was only open the regular hours. They weren't open the extended hours. And that payroll was about a little over 30,000.
She said 12, okay, I get 12 people, 6 per shift, 12 per day, is that it?
No, 12,
Per shift?
every shift you gotta have 12 people.
Okay, that's a lot
So
per
there's 2
site.
shifts, so there's 24 people a day per
Okay.
site.
I just want to make sure we're good stewards, not only of the county's money, but also of our volunteers' time in there as well.
Yes, but we must also make sure that we are best stewards of the people who go.
And we did budget enough that if we were gonna have 2 sites.
Okay,
We did not budget for 3, but we did budget for 2.
And just from my point, I'm good with the 2 sites. And I agree that, you know, it does balance out the county. And as far as the travel, if you look at the north end of the county, of course, there's a lot of empty space up there and very rural. But with the population center in the southern part of the county, I think it would be wise to take the 2 sites.
Okay, now, one already established is the agricultural center. The other one that we have here is Aberdeen Parks and Recreation. I know initially we had not got a response from them, but they have now responded and said yes. Is there any other conversation or anything that we need to discuss before we go on with the motion on this?
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask staff, in Aberdeen, which of the 2 sites?
Between Aberdeen and Pinehurst.
Well, was there 2 sites in Aberdeen?
No,
Just the one.
just Aberdeen Recreation or
I
Pinehurst.
just misheard. I was thinking there was maybe 2 spots in Aberdeen.
My feeling was more toward the Pinehurst location, just because there's a light for people to get in and out of, where at Aberdeen, there's no light and there's one way in, one way out. The other thing is that is an election day polling place at West Aberdeen. They catch a lot of those people coming in on election day that think, well, I voted here at one stop. They had a lot of that this past time because people just ride by, and it's very accessible because it's on US 1. But the community center, the Pinehurst Community Center, is not an election day polling place. And it is accessible because it's right there off of 211. You have 2 major employers with the hospital as well as Pinehurst Resort right there in that area. So, but either side, whatever you choose.
I guess I think the Aberdeen, based on the map right there, is the optimal site for the southern park.
Well, I'd like to just make a comment. I too ran the numbers, Marty, and as I got through doing that exercise, I started reflecting on, so what did you really accomplish, Richard? What is your purpose of running those numbers? Well, it was curiosity and also a sense, like you voiced, that we have a prudent need to be concerned about the use of people's time and money. Because obviously running an election is both time and money for us as citizens. But better still, I started thinking, one of the things we want to do in light of the present environment is to make access to voting as free and open and convenient as possible for all people to vote. And that while we do want to consider time and money, we want to urge people to come to the voting place, cast their vote, vote online, whatever the mechanisms are. And we should do nothing to impede that. I myself would like to see as many voting sites as possible to make the message carried through the community. We want you to vote. We're interested in your vote. We're making it convenient to vote. So, well, those other analyses is very informative. I think we should always err on the side of how can we make voting more approachable for all of our registered voters. So whatever we decide today, I hope we will decide that we want to make it available, the voting available to all of the registered voters in Moore County. So those analyses are good. I myself would love to see 3 sites. I'd love to see 4 sites. But I do want to be respectful of people's time and of our tax money. I guess I just want to emphasize that. Right? Now, we have a plan that was also suggested too by the Moore County Democratic Party. Has that been made available to the people here?
I forwarded it to each member.
Yes, everybody.
I think that that deserves some discussion too.
Okay. What discussion would you like?
Hmm?
Yes.
Well, I'm saying, I'm open for discussion. I'm all in favor of it. I myself would like to see that, the recommendations put in place.
Well, Richard, I think I probably agree with you that everybody needs the opportunity to vote. All eligible voters in the county need to be able to vote. But let's face it, we have one official election day. We have 17 other days that they can go vote. And they also have the absentee ballot. And while being able to vote is a right, there's also some personal responsibility with that as well. If you can't figure out how to get to a polling place on 18 days or do an absentee ballot, I have some concerns about your real interest in the electoral system. I mean, really, I think everybody has an opportunity with that many days to vote on an absentee ballot. But I think the 2 sites we're talking about right now, Aberdeen and here in the Ag Center, I think that'll probably work this time.
Yeah, just a comment. It's important to consider be fiscally in line with expectations. But the greatest expectation is not only the right to vote, but to avoid the appearance of impropriety in setting up where people can vote. And our job is, and we work really very well together on that, even that we're going to put the voters' rights first. I know a lot of instances, we talk about there are a lot of days, but there are a lot of people without transportation and can't get here today. I think we've already come to the conclusion that we need more than the Ag Center. So now what we need to do is to determine, and everybody got the plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I see that everybody's worked on numbers and that kind of thing. I just wanted to be clear that we are being transparent and that we're putting the voters first in what we're doing. Now, I know you had car trouble.
Yeah, I apologize for being late. I could explain it all, but I think we have more important things to discuss than that. Just so, since I am late, I don't have any things from a conflict of interest aspect to just my concern this morning, which I think we all pledged at the start. Since I wasn't here for that, I wanted to mention that. Well, I understand Martin's concern. this is always a balancing act between trying to make as the right to vote as freely available as we can, with practical considerations of our board members, our staff, the poll workers, the judges, all those things. And I like to err on the side of trying to help the public as much as possible. But I'm certainly willing to listen to all the concerns in both directions before making a decision. Mr. Howland, for example, gave me that, and what I've told him is I have to hear everybody and all the evidence before I decide what I would like to do, because I'm aware of the fact that if we aren't unanimous, then we've got to go through the situation of going to the state and submitting plans. And so I would like to reach a consensus. But
Well, there's one thing that you may not know before you think. One of
All
the
right.
things that we have here is, and you have this, right?
yes,
Okay. Is.
I saw that
We're talking about one
information.
side, but we want the whole county to be represented. And in terms of being equidistant, in terms of where people live in the county, this is indicating that if there were not more than 2 places, the accent is here, at Aberdeen, Breck, and Parks. And it took a while, but they have agreed
Okay,
now that we can do that. And they've had quite a bit of conversation. I think the conversation we have is real, because money is real. The right to vote is more real. And so we are,
so we now have agreement from both Aberdeen and the Pittsburgh, or Pittsburgh. I live in the darn town, I ought to know. The Pinehurst Center there,
Right, and so-
that they would be willing to provide.
right, the Ag Center is mandatory, that's
Yes.
statutory.
Yes,
And if there were going to be one other place we're talking about in terms of covering the whole county, would be Aberdeen Parks, unless there would be 3. And so, is there any more discussion that we need to have before we move on with a motion on this?
I'd like to have some more discussion.
Because they have been,
Well,
okay,
Well,
what was our experience, refresh my recollection, we had a plan that did go to the state board in one of the past elections, since I've been on the board. And that turned out to work effectively. I didn't see that as a particular problem.
But you don't want to have to go to the state board. I mean, not if we can all agree. You don't want to have to go that route.
Yeah.
It would be much easier if everybody agreed.
Yeah, but I mean, if we have to do that, I wouldn't oppose that at all. I think that it's provided for in the statutes. It certainly is the mechanism that is placed there for the benefit of all voters. So, you know, I wouldn't see that as an impediment to any plan that we cannot agree upon. I think, you know, a unanimous plan would be fine, but it's not the lodestone, it's not the only thing that we should consider.
well, I think first consideration is to see if we are where we need to be without the limit. If it's 3 that we want, then let's talk about 3 and vote on it. If it's 2 that we want, let's talk about 2 and vote on it.
I can,
I don't think that we need to be looking beyond here until we determine that here can't work.
I'm comfortable with the 2. I mean, I looked at the diagram there, and that is an optimal arrangement with the Ag Center in Aberdeen, I think, for coverage in the county with 17 days at each location. So I can support 2 sites.
well, I have a couple questions for Angela, our interim director. I note that in purely from a standpoint of staffing, the email you sent us yesterday raised a couple of questions in my mind. Apparently we have, we have a situation where we have traditionally done no more than 2, and we actually did 1 last time. However, we're in a little different environment this time as far as what we can expect in the this year. That might be different from 2018 or 2014, and that is, I think, a more what's the right word? A political environment that suggests there's going to be a lot of people voting this year, probably more than ever before in the off-even year. I think I wouldn't be surprised if we come close to what we got in a presidential year. I don't know. I'm not an expert on these things. I don't know. Have you heard anything from the state about projections of what can be expected on that?
So right now, we still don't even know what is going to be on the ballot. So typically, we've heard rumblings about someone going to file against the sheriff. Haven't heard anybody filing against Ronnie. I do know I have a primary for the Republican side for clerk of court. That typically does not bring out anybody to vote. Nobody's running around to make sure they vote in the clerk of court. So when you look at what you have on your ballot, which is why I sent you copies of what was on the ballot at the time in 2018, I think the sales tax question was on there. That was a big ticket item, but yet we still didn't have the turnout.
Right.
So you got to look at what's going to be on the ballot. And a lot of time, those kind of races don't interest people unless it's a presidential. A lot of people just are not. That's why there's a lot of confusion on primaries, because a lot of people don't vote in primaries, so they don't understand
Right.
when they go to vote what kind of ballot they're. Why? Because you'd be surprised how many questions we get of, why is my ballot only got Republicans, or why does my ballot only have Democrats? Because it's a primary. People just are not understanding that, because a lot of people don't vote in primaries. I'm not saying the turnout won't be better, but I'm just saying you got to look at what's going to be on your ballot as well.
Well, for the primary, I guess it's right. But we will presumably have
We won't know
senatorial
until we
candidates.
start filing Monday. Now, we don't have to submit this plan until the 15th. So our filing starts Monday. Hopefully we'll have a better idea, after. people
My
start filing.
thought was that the statewide races are the ones that are more likely to get people out to the polls.
Not typically. They really don't. Unless it's a presidential, they don't typically
All right.
turn out for it.
Well, okay, that's one question I have. The other question I have is, I mean, obviously, if it was easy to do, I'd want as many polling places as we have during a general election. That's why I want to know.
That's why I put that in there about staff.
Right, but that's why
So
I
just because a site closes at 7:30, which down in Aberdeen, it's gonna close at 7:30. They can't close because after 5 o'clock, nobody comes in.
well, that's
They
what I,
have to stay open until 7:30. They have to staff it for everybody, just in case one voter comes in, those workers have gotta be there. So
Well-
they close at 7:30. They then have to do their reconciliation. They've gotta make sure they account for all their ballots. They secure our voting machine for the evening. They close down the laptops. Then they have to come back up here. Somebody's gotta come back up here. A lot of times staff, we would go out, help them close so that we're the ones bringing it back. We'll bring it back. And so let's say best case scenario, they get through at 7:30, they close by 8. That's everything balancing out. That's best case scenario. It's gonna be 8:30 before they get here. Then we have to do our processes, which is downloading the data from the laptops, from each laptop, uploading it into our system, then reloading the laptops with the updated information. And then, once we've done that, we've balanced out our processes for the night, then weekly, which will be, if we're lucky.
you reported that to us, and that's what I wanted to ask you about.
And that's
Because
17
here's the
days
question,
straight.
now, what you described as the process for the poll workers would be true, it's true for any particular one-stop location that is open. I mean, that's what they have to do, right? I mean, that's not unique,
No,
just because you have more spots. So then it becomes a question on that end of it. I'm not talking about your end yet, but I want to talk about that too. Then it becomes a question of, well, is it going to be difficult to find poll workers who would have the time and inclination to do that in a primary? Okay? And that's very important to me to know. If we have a staff if they want to really do, I know we have people who are very dedicated, maybe they'd like to do that. That's the first part of my question on that.
For
Would
this,
you like to get into your numbers? that you gave us?
this time, I would feel like I could staff the two. I don't think I could get three right now. And I just don't think we need it in this election. There's just not the turnout. That's making me have how many things left? I go from 48 to. But that's a lot of people. And then
But we
that's
staffed it
four sites.
before. But we staffed it before, in another election.
We did, but it was in the presidential election, yes.
All right.
What makes it more difficult to get poll workers for the primary?
Well,
Yeah.
we have people dropping out in municipal election left and right. When we do one stop, that's flexible. And so we always have somebody, oh, I can't make it today, this comes up today, and then you gotta try to balance out who can stay for them or pull somebody else over. So, and then with two different sites, then you've gotta have site managers. So I've gotta have a site manager for each shift. That makes me have to have 4 site managers. I'm down a site manager because she took a full-time job, so I've already lost one of my trusted site managers. And site managers, they're running that precinct, that whole site that day.
Is that somewhat different from a chief judge, I guess? What's the difference
It's
in their
similar, but
responsibilities?
they are running that site that day. They're managing those people. It's similar to a chief judge situation, but there's a lot involved. You've got same day registrations. It's a primary. There's a lot of ballots. They've got to make sure they're giving the right ballot styles out. So it's a lot involved.
I will say,
And wait a minute, one
Yeah.
more thing. And one stop has to have all styles. So unlike on election day, when you go to your precinct, it has your ballot style. It doesn't have everybody else's. That one, you've got to have everybody. So we're now split between 3 House districts. So you're not just getting a Republican ballot. You're getting either a Republican ballot that includes the 52 House, or if the 78 or 51 have a primary, you've got to make sure everybody's getting the right ballot style. And you've got to count for all of those ballot styles at one stop.
So that's a problem for you on the front end as to what ballots you're going to authorize for each of these places.
Well, I'm not saying it's a problem, but that's what I'm saying. They have to keep up with that. They've got to
Yeah.
make sure that they are working with all the
All right,
right
and then my other question does relate more to your work. You've described that what you have to do each evening at 7:30 when the people start coming in. Of course, I don't know, we were always here for the general election when, like we just were, when they come in as they do. Is that similar to the process you're talking about for the primary, or is it different somehow?
No, that's different from a one stop. One stop, they've got to bring in their ballots.
Because we're not here in the evening. for
Right,
that.
they bring in their ballots, they bring in their laptops. The laptops, you have to do a download from the data that the laptops process that day. Then you upload it into our system. Any changes, any same-day registrations have to be processed. Then we can download that data back onto the laptops to be ready for the
All
next
right,
day.
so how much more time in the evening is it gonna cost, would it cost for the staff to wet one?
Best case
additional-
scenario, we get out here around 9. I'm thinking more around 9:30.
It would take another half hour each evening to process the additional, if we went to 3?
Well, I mean, then you're dealing with all of those sites, yeah. And then if one of those sites has a problem reconciling, they don't get back up here at 8:30. So,
Okay,
can I make a comment about poll workers? I will say, after the Southern Pines primary, I had a lot of people say that, or I heard a lot of poll workers say that they may just start working only general elections. You know, I mean, when it's slow, like during one stop, when it's slow like that, I tend to think it disinterests our poll workers because it drags and it's just a slow day. So after the Southern Pines primary, I heard quite a few of or they told me that, you know, next year that they only want to work general elections. They don't want to work any primaries because it's just too slow. And so my concern with the one stop, especially during a primary, would be that is losing some poll workers. And it's tough to kind of keep them. It's, you know, we start out with this huge number of poll workers, and the closer it gets to those days, they start to drop out, or they have issues, or they've got this, or and then we get down to the bare minimum. So I will tell you that's a common problem we pop.
And that was part of my concern when I ran the number and came up with 9 minutes for a voter. I mean, one voter every 9 minutes. And when I went to a couple of stops in the primary, they had like 2 voters in the first hour and a half. And, you know, they're bored. They're wondering, like Henry says, you know, why am I doing this when there's hardly anybody here? Isn't there a way to compress this more so that the people that are working are actually doing something? So that was my concern when I ran the numbers. But I understand the issue for 2 sites. Like I said, I can live with 2 sites.
I have, aside from the number of sites, I have 1 or 2 questions about the days they're open, which I'd like to also ask about. The proposal that was submitted by the Democratic Party suggests additional Saturdays and also a couple of Sundays. I have heard historically, and I don't know that I'm no expert on the demographics of this, but I understand that the African American community tends to vote on Sunday a lot. That's their tendency after church sometimes. Would it be that difficult to perhaps have one Sunday at least reserved for a polling, have the one-stop sites be open?
Well, one thing that was included here is most services are over about 1 or 2 o'clock from 2 to 5. And that was in part of the information we got. And so what you're saying is really very true. A lot of people vote on Sundays because a lot of them don't have transportation. And there are people that can take them no other time. I think that's something we should do. And I think, and I read so much stuff, that what was proposed was from 2 to 5 on Sundays. And I think that is a consideration that we ought to put on the table.
I guess I understand your concern on the Sundays and all, but we're still talking 17 days, 11 and a half hours a day available for people. And I know a lot of people have friends take them to the polling place anyway. And I guess
Well, I think I'm talking about a whole lot of people you may not know anything about.
and I understand where you're coming from, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. I do respect what you've done with the numbers, and we have to consider everything. But I've personally seen where some would not have been able to vote, they could not vote on Sunday. And here what we're doing is we're being transparent, and we have to consider everything. We have to be financially responsible, but the major premise is that everyone who has a desire to vote must have the opportunity. And then we structure everything, if that's the major premise in this syllogism of transparency and equity in voting. So, I mean, we have to consider all those things. So the question becomes,
Well,
yes,
for the question, if you're
Yes.
going to move.
no, I'm not going to move anyplace. I'm just going to make a statement.
I think this is a good introductory discussion. But I suggest we not make a decision today.
Thank you, Richard.
I suggest.
Suggest we not make a decision today.
I think there's a reason for us to reflect. Certainly, I feel I have a reason to reflect on the precedent that we're perhaps setting. I think it's important that we think of about this from every angle possible. There's a concerted national effort by some to limit voting in the United States. And we're just a microscopic element of all of that. But it's important that we make a good decision for the people here in Will County. And we don't have to commit a plan until the 15th. I think there's adequate time for us to look at this data, do our own analysis again, redo it, and think seriously about the recommendations that we received from the Democratic Party. Let's invite recommendations from the Republican Party. And let's wait until we see who is going to be running in this, or what issues will be considered in the forthcoming elections. So I myself am not anxious to come to a decision.
And you said we'll start knowing Monday,
Well, we start filing Monday, the 6th.
and so we'll have a better perspective.
So if you want to have a meeting, maybe the week at that second week,
I thought your
On
deadline
my
was the 7th, is
it's
that?
the 15th.
It's the 15th.
Okay.
But we'll have to meet after hours because we'll be filing back here between the hours of 8 to 5. So we can't have a meeting during that time.
Well, I would like to respond to Richard's statement.
Yeah.
That there's concerted efforts in this country to limit voting, and I disagree 110%. And especially in Moore County. And you've been on board with me a little while, and I've kept the same stance as, and I agree with Mr. Carpenter. 17 days, there's some personal responsibility in it. It's just like paying bills. We wait till the last day to pay the bill. If we gave them 30 days, they would wait till the 29th day to vote. But I don't make those laws. The state provides that, and I'm fine. 17 days early voting. I'm fine with the Sundays. I'm fine with the 2 sites. I can just tell you, if we can't agree on 2 sites, that's kind of where we started at, in my opinion. From my point of view, that we might as well go to Raleigh, because I'm not going to vote for 3 sites. I will vote for extended hours or extended days, but 2 sites cover it. I hear what staff says, and that's really what gets me. When we went to Raleigh before, we've got one of the, or at the time, we had one of the most senior directors in the state. And she's run this county very efficiently. And we just throw their staff recommendation out the window because it's this political party that we want to push this for whatever reason, I don't know. Staff is recommending 2 sites. I think you've got at least 2 board members on here that, hey, we'll vote for 2 sites today. Like I said, I'll vote for the Sundays, at least 1. I'm all for helping the voters vote. But if we're going to go down a political stance on this, and you're going to try to drive this into, we want 5 or 6 or 10 or 4 or 3, we may as well go ahead and go to Raleigh. And I may lose that fight in Raleigh. And, I know how Raleigh, they explain it to us up there. They agree, the more the better. But again, when you're looking at the people, I would almost say that I would vote for 3 sites, but one of the requirements would be that you and Mr. Case have to be at those sites 11 hours a day for all 18 days and sit there yourself. And if you do that, I make a vote for that. And I'm not joking, but I mean, really, you need to see what the staff is up against. And you think about, we're sitting here today, and somebody, maybe the first day, 300 people were coming. But on that 10th day, you're going to sit there all day to see 5 people.
Well, Craig, I respect your opinion very much. You know that from, I think.
Oh, yeah. You and I get along great.
But I have sat there.
Mhm.
I've worked several.
For 18 days,
Okay,
17 days.
yes, I guess so. Well, I don't know about 17 days. No,
You work in the polls.
election days. Yeah, so I know what it's like when it's when there's a lot of downtime. Um, So, you know, I appreciate, if one thing is sure, you're very consistent in your approach, okay?
Okay.
And I respect your comments very much. I still feel very strongly that I think that we ought to, I hope we do not push for any action today, but delay it.
How much time, Madam Director, do you need to prepare that plan to be ready to go by the 15th? Do you need 3 days, 4 days, perhaps?
I just need to enter it into a survey.
Okay,
Okay, so it sounds to me that we're obviously at a stalemate now. There's more information that we need.
Well, no,
Did-
excuse me, let me correct you. We don't have a stalemate. There is 5 members on this board. I'm only one.
No, I'm not talking about you individually. I'm making a comment about where we are in terms of having enough information to make a decision. And I can certainly appreciate that. And one of the things that would be important in making that decision is to just see what we're talking about, as you were saying earlier, so hold until we have all the information, to be able to have all the information, to be able to make an informed decision that, you know, we were saying earlier about. And so I'm thinking that instead of making a decision today, I want to make sure that whatever conclusion we come to is in the best interest of the people who are voting in this county. That if you're in agreement, that we'll wait and see, as Mr. Ashton was saying earlier, about just what's going to happen next week in terms of who is going to be signing up, and we'll be in a position to make an informed decision based on all the information.
so the information you're looking for is who's going to be on the ballot? Is that the information you're waiting for, Mr. Chairman?
No, Ms. Ashton was saying that
No, you said you wanted more information. I'm trying to determine what
what I'm
information.
speaking about is a summary of all the information I've heard. Is what I'm speaking about.
Well, I was also
Yeah.
speaking specifically about that also.
Okay,
But that was his comment. That was including in the summary of.
Because I think that would be very helpful. But, you know, you identified that there are some issues that have the propensity to have more people come out to vote than other issues. Some candidates versus other candidates. So, you know, I mean, that's why we would want to know what's on the ballot.
Well, I think, I'm sorry, go ahead. I think there's, let's reflect on the fact that we just got the staff's recommendation yesterday. And perhaps it is premature to ask us to vote the very next day. When we have perhaps some difference of opinion, perhaps that can be worked out. I don't know, but I think I do think some additional time reflect might be useful to everybody.
Would someone like to put that to a motion?
All right.
Well, there's no motion needed really. I think we just need to adjourn the meeting. That's pretty.
Well,
So you might need to set another.
No, I'm
meeting
talking
date.
about to make a motion when we're going to come back again to determine when we're going to make this decision. It's the question I was asking.
All right. I'll make a motion that we adjourn this meeting with the expectation that we will come back to consider and decide the matter of our one-stop plan for the primaries. We want to pick a date?
I would say either Monday the 13th or Tuesday the 14th. And it needs to be after 5.
After 5.
Mhm.
Any
Okay, so
consent?
we can-
I'll agree to either date if for the motion purposes, if one date's better than another.
Because the information has to be in on the 15th, correct? Okay.
I close the business. On the 15th?
I think so.
Okay, 14th, all right?
5:30, okay?
Okay. That's my motion.
Okay, is there a second? Is there a second?
I second the motion.
You've heard that it's been moved and proper second that we would reconvene on the 13th at 5:30. You've heard the question.
Did I say 14th? I thought I said
14th, I'm sorry, on the 14th at 5:30. You've heard the question. Are you prepared to vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So moved. Okay. Meeting is adjourned.
Send my calendar so we don't screw it up.